The stars had always called to humanity. For 800 years they had answered that call, spreading across 200 star systems, building new homes on distant worlds. By the year 2847, nearly 50 billion humans lived among the stars. Yet in the grand hierarchy of galactic civilization, humanity remained small. The elder races looked upon them as children, energetic, curious, but ultimately unimportant. Nova Eden was humanity's most distant colony. It sat on the very edge of explored space, a green and blue jewel orbiting a yellow sun. 4 million people called it home. Scientists studied its unique wildlife. Farmers grew crops in its rich soil. Children played in its parks and dreamed of the futures they would build. Maria Santos had been the colony director for 12 years. She stood on the balcony of the administrative building, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Her grandson played in the garden below, chasing fireflies that glowed with bioluminescent light. "Grandma, look," he called up to her, "I caught one." She smiled and waved. These were the moments she lived for. Not the politics, not the reports, not the endless meetings, just this: family, peace, home. She did not know that in the darkness beyond the sky, death was coming. The Dominion had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They were in species, their society built on absolute hierarchy and cold efficiency. Their hive lords viewed the universe through compound eyes that saw other species as either useful or worthless. Humanity, they had decided, was neither. Humanity was a pest. For decades, strategists had watched human expansion with growing irritation. These soft, warm-blooded creatures spread like weeds, establishing colonies closer and closer to Dominion space. The hive lords held many meetings in their dark chambers. They studied reports. They calculated risks. Finally, they reached a decision. The humans would receive no warning, no demand to withdraw, no chance to negotiate. Such things were for species the respected. The humans were simply an infestation to be cleaned. Fleet Commander led the attack force. 40 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Nova Eden at precisely midnight local time. The colony's small defense station detected them immediately. Lieutenant James Park was on duty that night. He stared at his screen, not believing what he saw. "Unknown fleet detected," he reported, his voice shaking. 40 contacts, configuration matches military vessels. His commander's voice came back, confused. "There must be a mistake. We have no disputes with." The first plasma bombardment hit the defense station. Lieutenant Park never finished hearing the sentence. On the surface, Maria Santos was awakened by the sound of thunder, but the sky had been clear when she went to bed. She went to the window and saw fire falling from heaven. The fleet had positioned itself in a perfect orbital pattern. Their plasma cannons fired in coordinated waves, each blast powerful enough to vaporize a city block. They worked with mechanical precision, burning the colony grid by grid, sector by sector. The capital city of New Hope was the first to die. 1 million people gone in 20 minutes. The agricultural zones came next, then the coastal settlements, then the mountain research stations. Maria ran through the chaos, trying to reach the emergency bunker. The streets were filled with screaming people. Buildings collapsed around her. The sky itself seemed to be on fire. She grabbed every person she could find and pushed them toward the bunker. A young mother with a baby, an old man who could barely walk, a group of teenagers who had been at a birthday party. She pushed them all underground into what she hoped would be safety. But there was no safety. There were thorough. Deep penetration bombs followed the plasma bombardment. They were designed to destroy underground structures. The bunkers that humanity had built for protection became tombs. Maria made it to the communication center just before the roof collapsed. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Her left arm was broken, but she had one final duty to perform. She activated the emergency beacon and stared into the camera. Behind her, through the shattered windows, the world was ending. "This is Colony Director Maria Santos of Nova Eden," she said. Her voice was steady despite everything. "We are under attack by forces. There was no warning, no provocation. They came and they started killing." An explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. 4 million people lived here. Families, children, people who only wanted to build a home among the stars. They are destroying everything. She coughed. Blood appeared on her lips. "Tell Earth, tell them what they did to our children. Do not let them forget us. Do not let them forget what happened here." The ceiling began to crack. "My name is Maria Santos. I was proud to serve humanity. I was proud to lead Nova Eden. Tell my family I love them. Tell them." The transmission ended. In orbit, Fleet Commander watched the planet burn. His compound eyes reflected the fires below. He felt nothing. This was simply pest control. One ship escaped. A damaged cargo freighter named the Cassandra had been on the far side of the planet when the attack began. Its captain, a woman named Sarah, had watched in horror as the destruction unfolded. She had no weapons. She had no way to fight. All she could do was run. The Cassandra's engines were damaged, but Sarah pushed them beyond their limits. She aimed for the nearest human system and prayed she would make it. Behind her, Nova Eden died. The bombardment continued for 6 hours. When it was over, nothing remained. The cities were craters. The forests were ash. The oceans were boiling. 4 million people had been erased from existence as if they had never been. Fleet Commander sent his report to the Hive Lords. Infestation cleared. Human presence in sector eliminated. Recommend continued monitoring for recolonization attempts. The Hive Lords received the report with satisfaction. The humans would send protests, of course, diplomatic complaints, perhaps even a small military response. The Dominion would ignore the protests, reject the complaints, and crush any response. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong did what they wished, and the weak accepted it. They had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. They had judged humanity by the size of their known fleet. They had measured human resolve by their peaceful diplomatic record. They had looked at humanity's young history and seen a species that could be bullied and broken. They understood nothing. 17 days after the attack, the Cassandra limped into Earth's solar system. Sarah transmitted Maria Santos' final message to Fleet Command. Within an hour, it had been sent to every government official, every military leader, every news network on Earth and its colonies. The United Terran Assembly gathered for an emergency session. Representatives from every human world watched the message in silence. Maria Santos' face filled the screen. Her voice filled the chamber. Her final words hung in the air like a blade. "Tell them what they did to our children." When the message ended, no one spoke. No one moved. The silence stretched on, heavy with grief and something else, something darker. Finally, Fleet Admiral Way stood. He was an old man, 73 years old, veteran of 3 border conflicts. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned with cold fire. He spoke 5 words. "Activate the Black Contingency." Around the chamber, representatives looked at each other in confusion. Most had never heard that phrase, but the military commanders had. They went pale. In hidden shipyards scattered across 1,000 systems, lights began to turn on. Machines that had slept for decades rumbled to life. Automated factories began their work. Humanity had chosen peace, but they had never forgotten how to make war. And now, war had found them. The galaxy believed it knew humanity, peaceful traders, curious explorers, a young species still learning its place in the cosmic order. The official records showed that humanity possessed 12,000 warships, a respectable number for a minor power, enough to protect their colonies from pirates and small threats. The galaxy was wrong. 300 years before the attack on Nova Eden, humanity had looked at itself and asked a difficult question. They had studied their own history, the long centuries of war and violence that had marked their rise on Earth. They had fought world wars. They had built weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They had come within minutes of ending their own existence, more than once. When they finally reached the stars and met other species, they made a choice. They would be peaceful. They would be kind. They would try to be the civilization they had always dreamed of becoming. But they were not foolish. The black contingency was born from a simple understanding. The universe was vast and old, and peace could not be assumed. Humanity hoped for the best, but they prepared for the worst. Hidden shipyards were built in the empty spaces between stars. Factory moons were constructed in dead systems where no one ever traveled. Automated construction fleets worked in silence, year after year, decade after decade, building and waiting. Now they were waiting no more. Fleet Admiral Wei stood in the command center of the Luna shipyards, watching data streams flow across dozens of screens. Around him, officers worked with quiet intensity. The mood was grim but focused. "Report," he said. Admiral stepped forward. She was the head of Hidden Fleet Command, one of the few people who knew the true extent of humanity's military power. "The awakening is proceeding on schedule, sir. As of this morning, 412,000 vessels have reported ready status. Another 200,000 will be operational within the week. Final count will exceed 700,000 warships." 700,000. The number hung in the air. It was almost impossible to comprehend. The entire Dominion fleet numbered perhaps 90,000 vessels. The humans were about to outnumber them nearly 8 to 1. "Ship classifications?" Wei asked. 30,000 dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying a small moon. 150,000 heavy cruisers. 300,000 destroyers and frigates. 200,000 support vessels, carriers, and specialized craft. She paused. "We also have 47 planet crackers, though I pray we never use them." Wei nodded slowly. Planet crackers were humanity's darkest secret, weapons capable of shattering a world into pieces. They had been built as a last resort, a final option if humanity ever faced total extinction. He hoped they would surrender before such weapons became necessary. But he would use them if he had to. Nova Eden's 4 million dead deserved that much. "Begin fleet assembly," he ordered. "All vessels will gather at staging point Omega. We move in 30 days. The awakening spread across human space like ripples in a pond. In the asteroid belts of distant systems, mountains of rock split open to reveal the warships hidden inside. On frozen moons, ice cracked and fell away as massive dreadnoughts rose toward the sky. In the depths of gas giants, submarines that had waited for centuries surfaced and transformed into spacecraft. Humanity had hidden its fleet in plain sight, disguised as rocks and ice and debris. The galaxy had looked directly at them and seen nothing. Now, the disguises fell away and the truth was revealed. News spread quickly. Trading ships reported strange. Scout vessels from other species sent panicked messages home. Within days, every major power in the galaxy knew that something unprecedented was happening. The Galactic Collective, the loose federation of elder races that governed interstellar affairs, called an emergency meeting. Ambassador of the Methane Confederation spoke for many when he addressed the assembly. "Our intelligence indicated that humanity possessed 12,000 warships. Our latest estimates suggest they have revealed over 500,000, with more appearing every hour. How is this possible? Where did these ships come from?" No one had an answer. On Prime, the Hive Lords received their own intelligence reports. High Lord read the numbers 3 times, certain there had been an error. His species had ruled their territory for 10,000 years. They had crushed dozens of rebellions. They had destroyed species that dared to challenge them. They had never faced anything like this. "How did we miss this?" he demanded of his advisors. "How did the humans build such a fleet without our knowledge?" "They built in secret, High Lord, in systems we never monitored, in places we never thought to look. Then we will strike first. We will attack before they can organize. Send the fleet to—" "High Lord," the advisor's voice was hesitant. "Our entire fleet numbers 87,000 vessels. The humans have already assembled over 600,000, with more joining every hour. A preemptive strike would be suicide." For the first time in his long life, High Lord felt the cold touch of fear. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Wei prepared to address the assembled armada. His image was broadcast to every ship, every station, every colony. Billions of humans watched and listened. He stood alone on a platform, the stars visible behind him through a massive window. His voice was calm but carried the weight of centuries. 3 weeks ago, the Dominion attacked Nova Eden without warning or provocation. 4 million of our people were murdered. Men, women, and children. Scientists and farmers, dreamers and builders. They were killed not because of anything they had done, but simply because they existed. He paused, letting the words settle. They believed we were weak. They looked at our peaceful history and saw easy prey. They counted our ships and thought they knew our strength. They were wrong. Behind him, through the window, ships began to appear. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They emerged from fold space in perfect formation, an endless river of steel and fire. For 300 years, we hoped we would never need this fleet. We hoped that peace would prevail, that diplomacy would resolve any conflict. We chose to be kind, to be gentle, to be the best version of ourselves. His voice hardened. But we never forgot what we are. We never forgot where we came from. We never forgot that kindness without strength is just weakness waiting to be exploited. The ships kept coming, dreadnoughts the size of cities, carrier groups that could launch 10,000 fighters, destroyers moving in perfect formation like schools of deadly fish. The thought we were sheep because we chose peace. They will learn that we are wolves who dreamed of being shepherds. They will learn that our mercy was a choice, not a limitation. They will learn what happens when humanity stops dreaming and starts remembering. He raised his hand toward the window, toward the endless fleet assembling behind him. 700,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. Everyone crewed by volunteers who know exactly what we are fighting for. We are not going to conquer. We are not going to enslave. We are going to deliver justice for Nova Eden and ensure that no human colony ever burns again. His eyes seemed to look directly at every viewer, every soldier, every citizen. They wanted to teach humanity fear. Instead, they have reminded us what we are capable of. They have awakened something they do not understand and cannot stop. He lowered his hand. In 7 days, we move. May whatever gods exist have mercy on them, because we will have only justice. The broadcast ended. Across human space, the reaction was the same: tears for the dead, pride in their species, grim determination for what was to come. The fleet continued to assemble, growing larger with every passing hour. The galaxy watched in stunned silence, struggling to understand how they had misjudged humanity so completely. And in the dark chambers of Prime, the Hive Lords began to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. They had poked what they thought was a sleeping lamb. They had awakened a dragon. The human fleet moved through space like a river of stars. 700,000 ships stretched across light years, their engines burning bright against the darkness. At the front flew the dreadnoughts, massive vessels bristling with weapons. Behind them came the cruisers, the destroyers, the carriers with their endless swarms of fighters. Supply ships and medical vessels brought up the rear, ensuring the fleet could fight for months if necessary. Fleet Admiral Wei watched the formation from the bridge of his flagship, the UTS Remembrance. The ship had been named for this moment, though no one had known it at the time. Now, The name felt like prophecy. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Collective," his communications officer reported. "They demand that we halt our advance and submit to diplomatic arbitration." Wei almost smiled. "Put it through." The face of Ambassador Al appeared on the main screen. He was a Methane Confederation diplomat, a species known for their cold logic and careful neutrality. His expression showed what might have been concern. "Admiral Wei, the Galactic Collective formally requests that you cease your military advance. The destruction of Nova Eden was a tragedy, but responding with such overwhelming force threatens the stability of the entire galaxy. We urge you to—" "Ambassador," Wei interrupted, his voice flat. "Where was the Galactic Collective when Nova Eden was burning? Where were your diplomatic interventions when 4 million people were being murdered?" Hesitated. "The attack happened too quickly for us to. They have been threatening human colonies for decades. We filed complaints. We requested mediation. We asked for help. The collective told us to be patient. The collective told us that they were a respected elder race and we should not provoke them." Wei leaned forward. "You watched our children burn and said nothing. Your laws mean nothing to the dead. This transmission is over." The screen went dark. Similar conversations happened across the galaxy. The collective sent envoy after envoy, each one carrying demands and threats and promises. The humans listened politely and continued their advance. No amount of diplomatic pressure would stop them now. But not every species sided with the collective. They were one of the oldest races in the galaxy, ancient pacifists who had given up war before humanity's ancestors had left the oceans. They lived on a single world, a paradise they had cultivated for millions of years. They had watched empires rise and fall without ever taking sides. When the human fleet entered their space, they sent a single ship to meet them, not a warship, a simple transport carrying one passenger, Elder, the oldest living. Wei agreed to meet with him, though he could spare little time. They sat together in the Admiral's quarters, two old beings from very different worlds. "I have lived for 4,000 years, said. His voice was soft like wind through leaves. "I have seen many wars, many atrocities, many acts of vengeance. They all end the same way, Admiral, in ashes and regret." "What would you have me do?" Wei asked. "Forgive them, pretend Nova Eden never happened." "I would have you consider what you will become. You are not like the Admiral. Your species values life. You create art, music, philosophy. You dream of better futures. Will vengeance not destroy the thing that makes you human?" Wei was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion. "I have a granddaughter. She is 7 years old. She likes to paint pictures of butterflies and dream about visiting other planets. When I look at her, I see every child who died on Nova Eden. I see all the futures that were stolen." He met ancient eyes. "I do not want vengeance, Elder. I want to ensure that no other child is murdered because we were too weak to protect them. I want to show the galaxy that humanity is not prey to be hunted. If that costs me my soul, then so be it. My granddaughter's safety is worth any price." Nodded slowly. "Then I will pray for you, Admiral, and I will pray for they do not know what they have awakened." "No," Wei agreed, "they do not." The fleet continued its advance. The High Command was not idle during this time. They knew they could not match the human fleet in open battle, so they turned to other tactics. Raiders were sent to attack human supply lines. Assassins were deployed against human commanders. Saboteurs tried to disable key ships. None of it worked. Human ships traveled in tight formations, protecting each other. Human commanders were guarded by layers of security that the assassins could not penetrate. Human technology included countermeasures for every form of sabotage they could imagine. The raiders were the most aggressive. A fleet of 5,000 warships ambushed a human supply convoy in the Nexus system. They expected easy prey, cargo ships and their escorts, perhaps a few hundred defenders at most. They were wrong. The convoy was guarded by 2,000 human destroyers, ships that had been designed specifically for this kind of fighting. They were small, fast, and deadly. Their captains had trained for years in hit-and-run tactics. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the raiding force had been completely destroyed. Not a single ship escaped to report what had happened. Commander, the same officer who had led the attack on Nova Eden, commanded the raiders. His final transmission was captured by human intelligence. They do not fight like the others. They fight like something that has nothing left to lose. He was right. The humans had lost Nova Eden. They had lost 4 million people. What more could they take from them? The answer was nothing, and that made humanity the most dangerous enemy they had ever faced. As the fleet drew closer to space, stories began to spread among the other species. Stories of human determination. Stories of their strange combination of mercy and ferocity. Stories of a species that had chosen peace but never forgotten how to wage war. Some species were terrified. They looked at the human fleet and saw their own potential destruction. If humanity could do this to what might they do to others? But some species felt something different, hope. They had been bullies for 10,000 years. They had conquered and enslaved and destroyed, and no one had ever been able to stop them. The elder races of the collective had accepted aggression as the price of stability. The smaller species had simply suffered in silence. Now humanity was doing what no one else had dared to do. They were fighting back. Secret messages began reaching the human fleet. Intelligence about defenses, maps of their territory, offers of support from species who had their own reasons to hate the Dominion. Admiral Wei accepted the intelligence gratefully. He was careful not to involve these species directly, not wanting to make them targets for retaliation. But their help was invaluable. 6 weeks after leaving human space, the fleet reached the border of the Dominion. Ahead lay the core systems of an empire that had ruled for 10. Behind lay the ashes of Nova Eden and the memory of 4 million dead. Wei stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, looking at the star map. Prime was still weeks away, defended by the largest military force the Dominion had ever assembled. The battles ahead would be brutal. Many humans would die. But they would not stop. They would not turn back. They would not accept any peace that did not include justice. All ships, Wei said, his voice carried across the fleet. We are entering enemy territory. From this moment forward, every system we pass through, every station we capture, every victory we achieve brings us closer to Nova Eden. Remember why we are here. Remember who we are fighting for. He paused, then spoke the words that would be remembered for centuries. Today we are not explorers, we are not traders, we are not diplomats. Today we are the wrath of 4 million souls who will never see another sunrise. Today we are humanity united. Today we are vengeance. The fleet crossed the border. The war had truly begun. Prime was a fortress world. For 10,000 years, the Hive Lords had built their defenses, layer upon layer of protection around their home planet. Orbital stations circled the world like rings of steel. Weapons platforms drifted in carefully calculated patterns, their targeting systems able to track thousands of enemies at once. Planetary shields hummed with enough power to stop a small sun. 80,000 warships waited in formation, the largest concentration of military force the Dominion had ever assembled. Their commanders were veterans of 100 campaigns. Their crews were trained from birth for combat. They had never lost a war. They had never fought humanity. The human fleet arrived at the outer edge of the Prime system on a Tuesday by Earth's calendar. Fleet Admiral Wei looked at the defensive formation and felt something that surprised him: respect. They were not cowards. They had not fled or hidden. They had gathered their strength and prepared to fight. It would not save them. "Begin the attack," Wei ordered. The Battle of Prime began with silence. Human ships did not charge forward in a wild rush. They spread out in precise patterns, each vessel taking its assigned position. Scanners probed enemy defenses, looking for weaknesses. Communications officers coordinated movements across thousands of ships. They attacked first. They launched waves of fighters, thousands of small craft swarming toward the human lines. It was a classic Dominion tactic, designed to overwhelm enemies with sheer numbers. Human carriers responded. Launch bays opened and fighters poured out, piloted by men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The two swarms met in the darkness between fleets, and space lit up with weapons fire. The fighter battle raged for hours. Human pilots died by the hundreds, but for every human lost, 10 fell. Human fighters were faster, more maneuverable, equipped with targeting systems that they could not match. Slowly, the swarm thinned. On the second day, the heavy ships engaged. Human dreadnoughts moved forward in formation, their massive guns charging for long-range bombardment. Defense stations opened fire, filling space with plasma and missiles. The first human ships took hits. Shields flared and failed. Hulls cracked and broke. But the humans kept coming. They used tactics they had never seen. Gravity lances bent space itself, pulling ships out of formation. Swarms ate through armor like acid. Electronic warfare systems confused targeting computers and turned ships against each other. Admiral commanded the defense from his flagship. He was the greatest military mind the Dominion had produced in centuries. He had studied human tactics, prepared countermeasures, planned for every scenario he could imagine. He had not prepared for this. "They are not fighting like any species we have faced," he told his officers. "They adapt too quickly. They learn from every mistake. They fight as if every ship, every soldier, every pilot knows exactly what every other is doing." This was not far from the truth. Human tactical networks linked every ship in the fleet, sharing information in real time. When one captain discovered a weakness in defenses, every human commander knew within seconds. When one ship developed a new countermeasure, the entire fleet could use it immediately. They fought as individuals, each commander making their own decisions. The humans fought as one organism, millions of soldiers moving with single purpose. On the third day, the outer defense perimeter fell. On the fifth day, the orbital stations began to die. Human marines boarded them in brutal close-quarters combat. The fighting was savage. Humans killed each other in corridors and control rooms, their blood mixing on the floor. But one by one, the stations went silent. By the seventh day, only the planetary shields remained. Admiral Wei studied the situation carefully. The shields were powerful enough to resist conventional bombardment for months. He could starve the planet out, but that would mean a long siege while billions of civilians suffered. He had another option. "Bring forward the Hammer of Dawn," he ordered. The Hammer of Dawn was not a planet cracker, but it was close. It was a focused energy weapon designed to punch through any shield ever built. Using it would kill millions, but not using it would prolong the war and cost even more lives. Wei made his choice. The weapon fired. A beam of pure energy, bright as a young star, struck the planetary shields. For a moment, nothing happened. Then cracks appeared, spreading across the invisible barrier like ice breaking under pressure. The shields collapsed. Prime lay exposed. "All forces begin landing operations," Wei commanded. "Marines will secure the Imperial Hive. Civilian areas are not to be targeted. I repeat, civilian areas are not to be targeted. We are not here to commit genocide. We are here for justice." Some of his officers questioned this order. They had seen Nova Eden. They knew what they had done. Why should they show mercy to monsters? Wei's response was simple. Because if we become what they are, we lose something more important than this war. We lose ourselves. The landing was the hardest part of the battle. Ground forces fought with suicidal determination. They knew what defeat meant. Every building became a fortress. Every street became a killing ground. Human soldiers fell by the thousands as they pushed toward the Imperial hive. But they did not stop. Private was one of the first Marines to breach the hive's outer walls. She was 22 years old, from a small town in Mexico. Her cousin had been a teacher on Nova Eden. "This is for you," she whispered as she raised her weapon. The fighting inside the hive was brutal. Warriors, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dim light, defended every corridor. They were strong and fast and fought without fear. But the humans were motivated by something stronger than duty. They were motivated by grief. On the 9th day, the last resistance collapsed. Human Marines entered the Chamber of Lords, the sacred heart of the Dominion. The Hive Lords waited there, surrounded by their guards. They were ancient creatures, their carapaces with age, their compound eyes reflecting the lights of the human weapons. High Lord stepped forward. In his claws he held a ceremonial blade, the symbol of surrender. "We offer conditional terms," he said. "The Dominion will pay reparations. We will withdraw from contested territories. We will." "No," said Admiral Wei. He had come down to the planet's surface for this moment. He stood before the Hive Lords, an old man in a simple uniform, facing creatures that had ruled an empire for 10. "You offered no conditions to Nova Eden. You gave them no chance to surrender. You killed them all down to the last child, and you felt nothing." He stepped closer. "There will be no negotiations. There will be no conditional surrender. You will surrender unconditionally, and you will face justice for what you have done. Every officer who participated in the attack on Nova Eden will stand trial. Every leader who approved the operation will answer for their crimes." High Lord's compound eyes flickered. "And if we refuse?" Wei's voice was cold as space itself. "Then we will make an example that the galaxy will remember for the next 10,000 years. I would prefer not to. I would prefer to show that humanity is better than its enemies. But make no mistake, High Lord. If you force my hand, I will use every weapon at my disposal, including the ones I have prayed I would never need." The Hive Lords understood. They had seen what the Hammer of Dawn could do. They knew about the planet crackers waiting in orbit. They had lost the war, and now they faced a choice: surrender and face justice, or resist and face extinction. High Lord looked at his fellow lords. One by one they lowered their heads. He placed the ceremonial blade at Wei's feet. "The Dominion surrenders unconditionally." Wei picked up the blade. His hands were steady, though inside he felt only exhaustion. "The war is over," he said. "Now the work of justice begins." Outside, the guns fell silent for the first time in 9 days. The Battle of Prime was over. Humanity had won. But victory, Wei knew, was only the beginning. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. In the months that followed the Battle of Prime, the galaxy watched as humanity began the long process of rebuilding and justice. The Dominion, which had stood for 10,000 years, was dismantled piece by piece. Not destroyed. Humanity refused to commit genocide, even against an enemy that had shown no such mercy. But the Dominion as a political and military power ceased to exist. The Hive Lords were removed from power. Their vast territories were divided into smaller, independent states, each governed by local councils with human oversight. The military was reduced to a fraction of its former size, enough for self-defense but never again capable of threatening its neighbors. And the trials began. War crimes tribunals were established on a neutral world, broadcast across the galaxy for all to see. Fleet Commander, who had led the attack on Nova Eden, was among the first to face judgment. He sat in the defendant's chair, his compound eyes fixed on the floor, as human prosecutors laid out the evidence of his crimes. The recordings from Nova Eden were played. The final transmission of Maria Santos filled the courtroom. The images of burning cities and fleeing civilians were shown to billions of viewers across hundreds of worlds. "I was following orders," said in his defense. "The High Command directed the attack. I was merely an instrument." The human prosecutor, a woman named Sarah Park whose parents had died on Nova Eden, shook her head. "The soldiers who loaded the bombs were following orders. The pilots who dropped them were following orders. You gave those orders, Commander. You chose which cities to burn first. You calculated how long the population would take to exterminate. You are not an instrument. You are a war criminal." Was found guilty. He was not executed. Humanity had abolished the death penalty centuries ago, but he would spend the rest of his life in prison, forced to watch recordings of Nova Eden every day until he died. The Hive Lords received similar fates. High Lord, who had approved the attack, lived out his remaining years in a small cell, stripped of all power and prestige. The other lords who had voted for the operation were imprisoned alongside him. Some humans complained that this was too lenient. They wanted blood, wanted them to suffer as Nova Eden had suffered. But Fleet Admiral Way spoke against such calls for revenge. "If we become monsters to defeat monsters, then the monsters have won," he told the United Terran Assembly. "The people of Nova Eden did not die so that we could become the thing they feared. They died as innocents, and we will honor their memory by remaining worthy of it." Not everyone agreed, but enough did. On the first anniversary of the attack, a memorial was built on Nova Eden. The planet was still, the oceans had cooled, but the land remained a wasteland of craters and ash. Nothing grew there, nothing lived there, but humanity returned anyway. The memorial was simple, a wall of black stone stretching for miles across what had once been the capital city. On that wall, 4 million names were carved, every man, woman, and child who had died. It took years to confirm all the names, to ensure no one was forgotten. At the center of the memorial, a flame burned. It was powered by a small fusion reactor, designed to last for 10,000 years, the same length of time that the Dominion had ruled. The flame would burn for just as long, a reminder that humanity never forgets. Fleet Admiral Way attended the memorial's dedication ceremony. He was older now, his hair completely white, his shoulders bent by the weight of everything he had done and seen. He walked slowly along the wall, reading names at random. Maria Santos, the colony director who had sent the final message. James Park, the young lieutenant who had been first to detect the attack. Children whose names meant nothing to history, but meant everything to their families. A reporter approached him afterward. "Admiral, do you believe it was worth it? The lives lost in the war, the destruction, the years of fighting. Was it worth it?" Way looked at the flame for a long time before answering. "Ask me when the nightmares stop," he said quietly. Then he walked away. He never gave another interview. The galaxy changed after the Nova Eden War. Some species looked at humanity with fear. They had seen what humans could do when provoked, the terrible power they had hidden for so long. These species kept their distance, treating human territory with cautious respect. Other species looked at humanity with something like hope. They had been bullies for, taking what they wanted without consequence. Humanity had shown that bullies could be stopped. Smaller species, long oppressed, began to stand taller. The Galactic Collective reformed itself, creating new rules and new enforcement mechanisms. Wars of extermination were explicitly banned, with real consequences for violations. Humanity took a leading role in these reforms, determined to ensure that what happened to Nova Eden would never happen to anyone else. Centuries passed. The Nova Eden War became history, then legend, then almost myth. New generations grew up learning about it in school, but they did not truly understand what it had meant. How could they? They had never known a galaxy where humanity was seen as weak. They had never experienced the fear of being prey. Alien scholars studied the war endlessly. They analyzed the battles, the tactics, the political maneuvering. They wrote papers about human psychology and military doctrine. They debated the ethics of humanity's response. But they always came back to one question, the same question that had haunted the galaxy since the day the human fleet first appeared. How did humanity hide 700,000 warships? They proposed theories, hidden dimensions, advanced cloaking technology, secret alliances with other species. Some even suggested that the ships had been built during the war itself, that humanity had somehow constructed hundreds of thousands of vessels in just a few weeks. None of these theories were correct. The answer was simpler than any of them imagined, though they never truly understood it. Humanity did not hide the ships. They just hoped they would never have to show them. For 300 years, humanity had built and waited. They had created the most powerful military force in galactic history and kept it secret, not because they wanted to surprise their enemies, but because they hoped they would never need it. They had dreamed of a future where the ships would rust away unused, where peace would make them unnecessary. Nova Eden ended that dream. On the 500th anniversary of the Nova Eden War, a young human girl visited the memorial with her grandmother. The girl was 8 years old, with curious eyes and endless questions. "Grandma, why did they build so many ships if they didn't want to fight?" Her grandmother knelt beside her, looking at the names carved into the black stone. "Because, little one, sometimes the only way to protect peace is to be strong enough to defend it. Humanity chose to be kind, but we never forgot that kindness without strength is just an invitation for others to hurt you." Did the bad aliens hurt people here? Yes, a long time ago. They killed many, many people who did nothing wrong. The girl looked at the names, trying to count them but quickly giving up. There were too many. Are there still bad aliens out there? Her grandmother smiled sadly. There are bad people everywhere in every species, but humanity showed the galaxy something important. We showed them that the peaceful species are not always the weak ones. We showed them that mercy is a choice, not a limitation. And we showed them what happens when you mistake our kindness for weakness. She stood up, taking her granddaughter's hand. "The ships are still out there, you know, fewer than before but still enough to protect us. Still waiting, just in case. Humanity hopes we never need them again, but we will never forget how to use them." The girl nodded, not fully understanding but sensing the weight of her grandmother's words. They stood together in silence, watching the eternal flame burn against the darkening sky. Behind them the stars came out, thousands of points of light scattered across the heavens. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the borders of human space. Somewhere out there, other species watched and wondered and remembered. And somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between stars, peace reigned. Not because everyone was good, not because conflict had ended, but because humanity had shown the galaxy a simple truth. Some lambs have teeth. Some shepherds were once wolves. And some prices are too high for even empires to pay. The flame burned on, and humanity remembered. They would always remember.